Good morning, everyone. I am Carme Mangiron from the Autonomous University of
de la Universitat Autònoma de
Barcelona. I have brown hair that is above my shoulders curly. Brown eyes. I am wearing a black sweater, a red,
un pañuelo rojo,
maroon red scarf and some
rojo granate y unos pendientes rojos.
red earrings. I would also like to thank the organization, especially to Sergio Vera, that they have invited me to give this talk and to be part of this very exciting fair that is the first international fair of inclusive video games. FIVI, so thank you very much, and I hope that the fair goes superb, I'm sure. I will present my games talk next without barriers, current overview of accessibility in video games that has the support of the UAB of the Catalonia Transmedia Research Group and the WellRat projects and the AccessCat network, which is a knowledge transfer network. Video games are a global phenomenon, as already you know. Many people play games all over the world. It is interactive digital software, and this interactivity, which is more complex than interactivity, for example, when we watch a movie, is what makes its accessibility also more complex. Furthermore, video games are not just entertainment, too. They are used for educational therapeutic purposes. Therefore, they are increasingly present in our society. In addition, in some countries, such as Spain, they are considered cultural products. Therefore, it is imperative to facilitate access to video games for anyone who wants to play, since access to the culture and leisure are universal rights. It is an industry with great economic power. On this slide, figures from New Zoo appear that indicate that in 2023 the video game industry generated $187.7 billion worldwide, and in Spain, according to AEI, 12 million euros were generated in 2000 and 2022. In other words, it is an industry with great economic power, but unfortunately not all games are accessible to all the people who want to play them. Therefore, it is very important to promote or encourage accessibility in this definition. I have adapted it from the definition of the Special Interest Group on Accessibility to video games of the International Association of Video Game Developers, and they define accessibility as eliminating those barriers that are unnecessary and that users sometimes encounter when there are a mismatch between their capabilities and the capabilities that are needed to be able to play that game and be able to interact with it. Therefore, accessibility to video games must be promoted. Three very important aspects must be taken into account. One is the usability, that everyone can to use it, that is easy; the adaptability, that is compatible with assisted technologies. For example, with a screen reader with text-to-speech technology with a one-button control, and also the localization or linguistic accessibility, that is, the video game is available in the user's language because if, for example, there is only audio description of the cinematics in English, a Spanish or French blind person or person with low vision will not have access to that part of the game. Therefore, linguistic accessibility is also important regarding the accessibility barriers they encounter. Users Joan Folmer and Frederick distinguish them in three major barriers. 1. Users cannot receive stimuli, whether visual, auditory, or tactile. 4. Example, if in the game all the information appears only in textual or visual format, a blind person will not be able to have access. Secondly, it can also happen that the person who is playing cannot know what response they should give to the video game in order to perform the necessary action to be able to advance and continue progressing. This may be because they do not receive the input. As in the first case, for example, a deaf person who may be playing the game and comes to a scene in which a telephone rings but only
pero solo se oye
The sound of
el
the
sonido
telephone
del
ring is
timbre
heard
del
and there are no
teléfono
drawings of
y no hay, por ejemplo, unos dibujos de unas
waves or
ondas
vibration or
de
anything that point at the
vibración o
phone. Therefore,
algo
if that person does not
que señale el teléfono. Por lo tanto, esa persona, si no lo
hear it, he
oye,
will not be able to
no
know that he
podrá
needs to
saber
interact. Do
que
not pick up the phone to
necesita interactuar, ¿no? Coger el teléfono para
know
saber
what
qué
to do
hacer a
next and will not
continuación
be able
y
to
no,
progress in
no
the
podrá progresar en el juego.
game. Other people who face this
Otras
type of
personas que
barrier are
se
the people
enfrentan a este tipo de barrera son las personas
neurodivergent,
neurodivergentes,
since
porque
perhaps the
quizá
tutorials or
los
instructions are
tutoriales o las instrucciones sean
too
demasiado
complex and they do not
complejos y no
understand what must be
entiendan
done.
lo que se debe hacer.
To finish, the third grade
Para
barrier is you
finalizar, la
receive the
tercera
input,
gran
you know what
barrera es tú recibes el input, sabes lo que
you have to
tienes que
do, but you
hacer,
cannot provide the
pero no
input to
le
the game
puedes
because
proporcionar el input al juego porque no
you
puedes
cannot
manipular
manipulate the input
el
device, for
dispositivo
example, not the
de
controller
entrada, por
or
ejemplo, ¿no? El mando o lo que sea.
whatever. This, for
Esto, por
example, would
ejemplo,
affect people
afectaría
who
a
have
las
reduced
personas que
mobility.
tienen movilidad reducida.
How are all
¿Cómo
these people
superan
these
todas
barriers to
estas
being able to
personas
play? Well,
estas
playing
barreras para poder jugar? Pues jugando
with the
con
help of
ayuda de
other
otras
people, playing modified
personas,
versions, for
jugando
example,
a
in one
versiones modificadas, por ejemplo, en uno
of
de
the
los
Dooms
Dooms
included subtitles that
se
also included
integraron
subtitles
subtítulos que incluían también subtítulos para
for the sound effects if
los efectos de sonido. Si se
footsteps were
acercaban
approaching of a bullet game and
pasos,
which were
si
very
viene
important to
una
be able to play
bala y que eran muy importantes para poder
a
jugar a un
shooter.
shooter.
Another option is to
Otra
play video
opción
games
es
designed
jugar
for
a
a
videojuegos diseñados para un colectivo
specific
específico,
group,
por
for
ejemplo,
example,
los juegos
games.
de audio
Audio
para
for blind
personas
people
ciegas,
1.
los juegos
Button
de un
1 switch
botón o
games
el
in
switch
English
en
for people
inglés
with reduced
para
mobility
las
that are
personas con movilidad reducida, que son
great and are very good
estupendos
and
y
have
que
a great
están muy
time, but they
bien y
also
se lo
want
pasan
to
fenomenal, pero también
play the
quieren
games that everyone
jugar a
plays
los
and that they are
juegos que
talking about.
juega todo el mundo y de los que está hablando todo el
Everyone and
mundo.
that they
Y
can
que
play the
puedan
same
jugar
games is
a
another
los
tool
mismos
of
juegos es otra herramienta de inclusión e integración social.
social integration inclusion. In addition,
Además,
assistive
se puede
technology can be
usar,
used,
como ya
as I already mentioned,
mencionaba,
for
la tecnología asistida. Por
example,
ejemplo, hay
there are mice that are
ratones
controlled with the
que
head or
se
straws to be
manejan
able
con la
to
cabeza o las pajitas para poder
blow and provide
soplar
input to
y
the
dar
reading
input
game,
al
screen
juego,
that we have already mentioned,
lector de pantalla que ya hemos mencionado, etc.
etc. But without a
Pero,
doubt, although
sin
all these
duda, aunque
options are
todas
very
estas
good, the best
opciones
one
están muy bien, la mejor
is a bit
es
of
un
a
poco
combination
una
of all of them, but
combinación
also that the design
de todas, pero también que el diseño
is
sea
inclusive and accessible
inclusivo
and
y
allows each
accesible
person
y
to
permita
personalize
personalizar a cada persona
the
el
game
juego,
menu,
el
the
menú de
configuration
juego,
to
la
be able to activate
configuración para poder activar
those
aquellas
options that allow
opciones
you
que
to
le
play as you
permitan
like and as you can.
jugar como le guste y como pueda. Por tanto,
Therefore, it is to
es
have a range
tener
of options
un
and each one
abanico de
chooses. Each one
opciones
chooses the
y
ones
cada una elige las que
they need in
necesita.
terms of the current
En
panorama. Going
cuanto
into
al
more detail,
panorama
I will
actual,
talk a
entrando ya en más detalle, hablaré un
little bit
poquito
about
pues, de
guidelines,
pautas,
of
del
hardware, of the trailers
hardware,
with
de los
audio description of the
trailers con audiodescripción, de los
video games event
videojuegos,
awards and
eventos,
specialized resources.
premios y recursos especializados. En cuanto a
Regarding
pautas,
guidelines, there
hay
are many and we have
muchísimas.
documented more than
Nosotras hemos documentado más de 66,
66, but here I will mention
pero
some
aquí
of the main ones
mencionaré
and those that
algunas
are
de las
most often cited.
principales y que se suelen citar más.
Are the
Están
game
las Game
accessibility guidelines made by
Guidelines,
academics and
hechas por
academics,
académicos y académicas,
people who
personas
work in the
que trabajan
industry
en
and
la
users,
industria y
and they are
personas
divided into
usuarias, y que se dividen en
basic,
básicas,
medium,
medias,
intermediate,
intermedias,
sorry, and
perdón, y
advanced, and it
avanzadas.
explains
Y
what type
os
of
explica a qué tipo de
group this guide can
colectivo puede
benefit from,
beneficiar
which games have
esta
it, how
guía,
to
qué juegos la tienen, cómo
implement
implementarlo.
it. Others that are also
Otras que
undoubtedly
también
very
son
useful
sin
are the
duda muy
Xbox
útiles son las de Xbox,
accessibility guidelines. There are already various versions,
Existen
each
ya
time they are
diversas versiones, cada vez lo van
expanding it, in
ampliando,
which they also
en las que
say who
también
they are
dicen a
directed
quién
at or
van
who they
dirigidas
can
o a quién pueden beneficiar,
benefit as
también de
well, what
otros
other games,
juegos,
technically how
técnicamente
you
cómo
can
se
make
puede
links
hacer, enlaces a otros
to other
recursos,
resources,
etc.
etc. Then we also
Luego
have the
tenemos también
accessible
las
player
Accessible Player
experiences of the
de la
organization. Hey, to
organización
gamers from the
Able Gamers de los
United
Estados
States,
Unidos,
the approach is a
que
little
el enfoque es
different
un
since
poco
they
diferente,
distinguish
ya que lo
between
distinguen entre
access
patrones
patterns,
de
because if you
acceso,
can't access the
si no
video
puedes
game, you will no
acceder al
longer be able
videojuego
to
ya no vas a poder jugarlo,
play it, and
y
challenge patterns
patrones
that
de
they call it in
challenge, que lo
English.
llaman en
It could be the
inglés,
challenge
que
or
podría ser el desafío o de
gameplay. How are you
jugabilidad.
going to be
¿Cómo vas
able
a
to
poder
play
tú
taking into account these
jugar
barriers?
teniendo en cuenta, ¿no?, de estas barreras, pues qué
Because
se
what could
podría
be
hacer
done to
para
overcome them, and then we
superarlas?
have Can I Play
Y
That,
luego
which is
tenemos Can I Play That, que es
a
una página
managed
web
website where they write reviews, and we
gestionada y
also
en la
have
que
guides
escriben
for
reseñas y también tenemos guías,
people with
personas con
disabilities.
discapacidad.
So much is
Por lo
very
tanto,
important
es
because
muy
they know what
importante porque ellas saben lo que
they need and in
necesitan.
any aspect of
Y en cualquier aspecto de
Accessibility, it is very important to always take into account the opinion of the
de las personas usuarias.
users.
Por
Lastly,
último,
we
tenemos aquí
also have here in the
también
image the white
en la
paper on
imagen, el libro
accessibility
blanco
for
de accesibilidad para desarrolladores
developers of the
de la
11, which is
11,
also
que
very
también es
useful
muy
because
útil
it
porque
includes
incluye
different
diferentes
guide
guías,
entities.
indica
It
el nivel de
indicates the
el
level
de
of
dificultad,
difficulty
a
who
quién
benefits, and it
beneficia,
is in
y está en español, que
Spanish,
también
which
es
is also
importante.
important in terms of
En
hardware.
cuanto
We
al
have
hardware, tenemos
the
el
Xbox
mando
controller, which is called in English Xbox
que se llama
Adaptive
en inglés Xbox Adaptive Controller, que
controller that
salió en
came
el
out in
2019
2019, and it allows
y
you to
permite
connect many different
conectar muchos
peripherals to
periféricos diferentes para facilitar
make it easier for people with
que puedan
reduced
jugar las
mobility to
personas con
play, just
movilidad
like the
reducida. Igual que el
Access controller for
para
PlayStation 5 that we have
5,
here in the
tenemos
image
aquí
that
la
this rosco
imagen
looks
que
like,
aparece este rosco
with the
con los
different
diferentes
modules to be
módulos
able to
para
connect
poder ir
whatever is needed.
conectando lo que se necesite. También
Also,
esta
this lever
palanca
to be
para
able
poder
to play
jugar
with just
solo
one
con
button,
un
and which
botón,
came out
y
just
que salió justamente antes de
before
Navidad,
Christmas in
en
December
diciembre del
2023, and
2023.
Nintendo
Y
Switch also
Nintendo
since
Switch también desde el
2020
2020
and
y el
21 in
21 en
Europe has the
Europa
J-Flex
tiene el
controller
modo
that
Joy
also
Flex,
allows
que también
people
permite que la gente con
with
movilidad
reduced mobility
reducida
to play.
pueda jugar.
As
En
for the
cuanto a los
trailer,
trailers,
a big step
perdón,
forward in accessibility
un gran paso adelante en la accesibilidad fue la
was the
inclusión de
inclusion of
trailers
trailers with
con
audio description that
audiodescripción,
Ubisoft
que
has been
Ubisoft lleva haciendo desde el 2020,
making
que es
since
un año muy
2020,
importante
which is a
para
very
la
important year
accesibilidad.
for
Los jugadores con
accessibility
baja
for players
visión
with low vision and
y
blindness.
ciegos
They were
estuvieron muy
very happy
contentos
with
y
this
contentas con
development,
este
but of course,
desarrollo, pero claro,
the
lo
important
importante
thing is
es
to go
ir
one
un
step
paso más
further and
allá
include the
y que se
audio
incluya
description
la
in
audiodescripción en las
the
cinemáticas, ¿no?
cinematics,
Algo que
not something that
ahora
already
ya
happens
ocurre,
now, but
pero
in
en el
2020 it
2020
still did not
todavía no ocurría. El
happen.
2020 también es
2020 is also another
otro
very
muy
important
importante
year
por
due to
otro
another
hito, que
milestone,
fue
which
el
was the
lanzamiento de The Last of Us
launch of The Last of
Parte
Us Part
2
2 by
de
Naughty
Naughty
Dog, which
Dog,
has been
que se ha
considered the
considerado el juego más
most
accesible de la
accessible game
historia,
in history
que
that has
cuenta
more
con
than
más de
60
60 opciones de accesibilidad y
accessibility
tiene
options and has 3 pre-configured
preconfiguraciones
activate
en
and
que tú puedes
deactivate
activar y
whatever
desactivar lo que quieras.
you want, and then they went one
Y
step
luego
further, they added even more
fueron un
options and
paso
of
más allá, añadieron aún más opciones, una de las
which it
cuales
is
es
very
muy
important that it
importante,
is the audio
que es la
description for the
audiodescripción
cinematics
para
in
las cinemáticas en el
the remake of
remake
Last
de
of Us
Last of
1
Us
that came out in
1, que salió
2022.
en el año
Other video
2022.
games that must be
Otros videojuegos que hay que
praised for
comentar
their
y alabar por sus opciones de accesibilidad
accessibility options
son
are
el
Forza Horizon 5,
5,
which is,
que
I would
es
say, that it is
diría que
the
es el
only
único
AAA
AAA
that
que incluye lengua de signos
includes sign language in
en
English.
inglés
Only what we
solo, lo que
mentioned before
comentábamos
is not
antes, ¿no?
about the
Del problema de la accesibilidad
problem of
lingüística.
linguistic accessibility. Then we
Luego
have the
tenemos el
Forza
Forza Motorsport y el
Motorsport
Mortal
and the
Kombat
Mortal
1,
Kombat 1
que
that are
están
also
nominados
nominated for
también
the
para los premios de FIVI,
FIVI Awards
que
that
tienen
also have
también
many
muchas
options of
opciones de accesibilidad,
accessibility, but
pero
also
también
audio
audiodescripción para las
description for the
cinemáticas,
cinematics,
¿no?
even
Incluso
those
esas
cinematics, the
cinemáticas, el golpe
CUDA
de gracia del Mortal Kombat,
grace of
así
Mortal
tan
Kombat,
violento y
so
con tanta
violent and
gore,
with so much
pues
gore,
está
it is
audiodescrito
also
también.
audio described. And as for the events, there
En cuanto a los eventos, también
are also
existen
some
algunos
events. The
eventos.
first
El
one that
primero
took place that focused
que
on
tuvo lugar, que se centraba en accesibilidad,
accessibility is the
es la
conference that
conferencia
we
que
organize
organizamos
at
en
the
la UAB, el
UAB, the
congreso, más
Congress.
bien, sobre
More on
localización y
localization
accesibilidad
and
en videojuegos,
accessibility in
cada 2
video
años
games
desde
every
el
2 years
2020.
since
Luego está también
2020.
la
Then there
Game
is also the Game
Accessibility
Accessibility
Conference,
Conference
que
that
se
has been held
celebra anualmente desde el
annually since
2017, a veces una vez,
2017,
a veces
sometimes
dos.
once, sometimes
La
twice. The
próxima
next
edición
edition will
será
be
en
in
abril en Londres.
April in London, and our
Y
fair FIVI
nuestra feria FIVI
AE in Cuenca starting
en
this year.
Cuenca
We
a partir de este año.
also
También
have
tenemos
awards, which
premios,
is
que es
another
otra
way of
manera
celebrating
de
and
celebrar
encouraging
y animar a las
developers
desarrolladoras
to continue
a
working in
continuar
order to
trabajando,
improve
¿no?
accessibility.
En aras de mejorar la accesibilidad.
The Game Awards,
Los
which
Game
are like the
Awards,
Grammy
que
or the
son
Oscars for
como
video
los
games,
Grammy o los Oscar de los videojuegos,
introduced in
introdujeron en el
2020 a
año
category of
2020 una
innovation in
categoría
accessibility.
de innovación en accesibilidad.
That
Aquel
year,
año,
as it
como
could
no
not be
podía ser de otra
otherwise, won The
manera,
Last of Us
ganó
2.
The Last of
I have
Us 2. He puesto aquí
also put here
también
other games that
otros
have been winning,
juegos
so
que han
you
ido
can see a
ganando
little,
para
well,
que
what
veáis un poco pues qué tipo
kind of
de
games and
juegos y de
developers are from
desarrolladoras
triple SAS or
de
leading.
triple SAS están liderando ahora
Right
mismo
now, the
el
whole
tema de la
issue of
accesibilidad.
accessibility, we have Forza
Tenemos
Horizon.
Forza
Think that
Horizon
we
5, que ya habíamos comentado,
had already mentioned God of War Ragnarok, and then
Ragnarok,
the Forza
y
engine that
luego
has
el
won.
Forza Motor, que ganó el año pasado.
Last year won the Game
La Game
Accessibility Conference,
Accessibility
also has
Conference
some
también
awards
tiene
from
unos premios desde el
2022.
2022.
And
Y
here
aquí
they are
son
all
todo
accessibility
premios de
awards. I
accesibilidad.
think
Yo
there are
creo
more. than 12, 15 categories
de
or something.
12, unas 15 categorías o algo así.
Quite
Bastante
diverse, not only
diversas,
for
no
the
solo
best
para el
triple
mejor
game, the most
juego
accessible
triple A más
indie game.
accesible, juego indie, también por
Also
las
for the
distintas
different accessibilities,
accesibilidades,
also the
también
best.
al mejor periodismo,
Journalism,
la
the most
desarrolladora más
developer.
comprometida,
Committed the
la
most.
persona más comprometida,
Committed person, the
el
best, the most
mejor, el
accessible
periodismo más
journalism, the research on.
accesible, la investigación sobre accesibilidad académica
Academic accessibility the
mejor
best
en
in
aquel
that year,
año,
so it is
así
also
que
very
también es muy
important that
importante que se reconozca
these
y
things
se
are
premien estas
recognized and
cosas.
rewarded,
Y
and this year's
la
ceremony will
ceremonia de
be
este año se
broadcast day by
retransmitirá
streaming, and it will
por
surely be
streaming y
towards
será
end of this
seguramente
month
que a
of
finales de este mes de enero.
January, and we also have the
Y también
FIVI Awards.
tenemos los
There are 3
premios del
categories,
FIVI.
as you
Hay
already
3
know.
categorías, como ya sabéis, la
Choose
Video
your own
Cegoti a
video
Video
inclusive
Aventura
adventure,
Inclusiva,
the Video
el
Cod Award
premio
for
Video
the
Cegoti al juego
most
más
accessible
accesible para
game for
personas
people
sin
without
visión,
vision, and
y
then the
luego
award
el
here we all
premio
play
Aquí
for
jugamos todos
the
para
video game more
el videojuego
inclusive, and
más
there is less than
inclusivo.
what
Y ya
excitement to
queda
see
menos. Qué emoción para ver
who will have
quién
won
lo
it
habrá
in terms
ganado.
of other
En cuanto a otros recursos especializados,
specialized resources.
tenemos
We also
también
have this little
este
book is a
librito,
PDF
es
that
un
is
PDF que está online, disponible
available
en internet
online for
de
free on
forma
the internet
gratuita,
of good
de buenas
accessibility
prácticas de
practices in
accesibilidad en videojuegos,
video games
que lo
that was
publicó el
published by
CEAPAC
CPAT
y
and the
Inserso,
insert coordinated by
Lucía
Lucia Perez Castilla already in 2012, so it's
o sea que ya también ya tiene
also
unos
a few
años,
years
pero
old
sigue
now, but it's
siendo
still very
muy
current, and there are
vigente.
also many
Además hay muchos artículos de muchas
articles from many
personas,
people, academics from the
académicos de la
industry,
industria,
blind
personas
people, etc.,
ciegas, etcétera,
that are very good, and
que
it's
están
very
muy bien
recommendable
y
to anyone who is
recomendable a quien le
interested,
interese,
just
igual que el curso de
like the Microsoft course on fundamentals of accessibility
fundamentos
to
de
video
la
games,
accesibilidad a los videojuegos, que
which
es
is
muy
very
reciente,
recent, is also
también está
online,
online,
takes less than
tarda
4
unas
hours to
4
do,
horas en hacerlo, tiene
has different
diferentes
modules,
módulos,
and is a very
tiene
useful
recursos muy
resource
útiles
for
para
people who
personas que
develop
desarrollan videojuegos, pero
video
también
games,
para
but
quien
also
investiga
for those who research
videojuegos,
video games or
quien
who are
tenga interés
interested in this
este
field.
campo.
Other specialized resources are
Otros recursos especializados son los
those
que
that
vienen
come
más
more
de
from users or the
personas
community,
usuarias de
such
la
as
comunidad, como el proyecto de
Sergio Vera's
Juegos,
Video Blind Project that you can follow on Twitter, where
de Twitter, donde
he
hace
makes
reseñas de
accessibility
accesibilidad,
reviews and also
también
offers advice on
ofrece
making
asesoramiento para hacer
video
videojuegos
games
más
more accessible or on what
accesibles,
non-accessibility problems there are in.
y
Sergio also regularly publishes accessibility reviews on hobby consoles as part of this project, so you know where you can find first-hand information, especially on accessibility for people without vision, but oh well, in for all of them, so they are very useful reviews. We also have Access Combat Guy, who is British, who also has a website and a project in which he also makes reviews and talks about accessibility of hardware, software, and also provides audio descriptions for cinematic games and games that do not have in collaboration with other users. In addition, there are also YouTube and Twitch channels where you can see blind or deaf people playing games or reviewing games on both YouTube and Twitch. Access Combat also has a channel, then there is Blind Gamer, which is Canadian Steve Sailor Accessibility from the United Kingdom, and they are very interesting. We also have web pages like we already mentioned, and I Play Jot. Then Game Accessibility, Nexus Game Access, Family Gaming Database, Golly, and Spain from the 11, where there are signs of accessibility. It is explained what accessibility options games have, etc. So it is also very useful for a person who is considering whether I should buy it or not, because they can see the value. Well, yes, no, I'm not going to be able to play it. Well, no, whether yes, well, when it out communities, etc. Finally, I would like to talk a little about research projects, and I'm going to refer to going over the most recent ones. There is more and more research on accessibility. Luckily, and I think there will be more and more too. For example, I will start with this project by H. Games from the University of Bristol and Shenzhen to improve accessibility for blind people through audio description. Here the game before I forget what's being taken in this game as well as a little browsing and exploration and enlargement into the story as you can. Interact with some objects to discover what has happened and age was added. Thanks to this project, audio description of the setting rooms the objects with which you can also interact them sound know that you were close to an object and that you could interact with it in. Tests were also carried out with users with low vision and blind people to see what difficulties they had or not and have the options of accessibility to make it easier for them what gaming experience they had. And it was also done in streaming. A person played in the audio description made so that blind people can follow it because you already know that another way to enjoy games is to watch plays and see other people playing, and therefore they also made the gameplay of this game accessible through live audio description. Other notable research projects is that of the Organization for People with Disabilities Scope of the United Kingdom, which distributed a questionnaire in 2020 that obtained 1326 responses, 812 of. They were from people with disabilities, and a report was made that is available online, also that of the Royal National Institute for the Blind. The Institute for the Blind of the United Kingdom in January 2022 carried out a study in which more than 500 blind and disabled people participated. Partial vision that one of the studies is very good. If it is not, I would say that the one with the most people who have participated also spoke with the industry to see what happens. How can you improve which one to transmit to them, not also that of the users in. This does not tell you, it will surprise you, but one of the main conclusions of the study that can also be consulted online is that the people who participated indicated that video games are still not sufficiently accessible. In other words, we still have a lot of work to do, although luckily less and less at the UAB. Now if we talk about the projects that we carry out, we had from 2019 to 22 a ministry project that studied the application of audio description to different new areas, one of them video games, and we wanted to see if audio description could improve the gaming experience for people blind and the accessibility, of course. So as a methodology, we carried out an online questionnaire that they answered validly. That is, we obtained 106 valid answers, which is not bad at all, and it was also for Spain, only in the area of Spain, and we interviewed 15 users, and it is part also from the doctoral thesis of Maria Eugenia the Queen that she will present later, and will also explain another result of the project, which is her model, a model to measure the accessibility of video games. So, don't miss her presentation. And currently we have another project from the Ministry about the possible implementation of easy reading to video games and also to cultural visits, but we work with the video game part in order to improve cognitive accessibility for neurodivergent people and people with learning difficulties, and we are going to investigate. Well, first, we are going to ask your needs and your accessibility preferences with focus groups, and then we also want to do tests with users and using easy language in the tutorials, the instructions of the video games, both written and recording easy audio, to see if this way accessibility could be improved. In conclusion, I think it has already become clear that accessibility is on the rise, and especially from 2020 until now, it is becoming more and more in vogue, and people are increasingly aware that it is very important. It is also very important in, I believe we are already going here, because studios like Naughty Dog, NetherRealm Studios, etc. are opting for this model, which is to promote accessible and inclusive design based on usability, adaptability, and also personalization, so that each person can choose those options on demand. The accessibility that you need, if implemented from the design, is
Es
relatively
relativamente
easy and
fácil y
inexpensive,
poco
and also
costoso.
all these development
Y también
companies
todas estas empresas desarrolladoras que están
that are champions of
que son
accessibility in the
adalides
triples to the
de
best.
accesibilidad en los triples A, los videojuegos de más
Selling and
ventas
most successful
y más
video games
éxito,
are taking a
están
people-centered approach.
tomando un enfoque centrado en las personas
Users,
usuarias,
because
donde
we
tenemos que
always have to
escuchar
listen to
siempre
their
su
opinion, their
opinión, sus
needs, and the
necesidades. Y la investigación que se
research
está
that is
haciendo,
being
que
done,
estamos haciendo,
is also
también está
always
siempre
focused on the users. It is
centrada en las personas usuarias. Es muy
also very
importante
important
también
that we
que
collaborate with
colaboremos
the
la
industry, the
industria,
academy,
la
and the
academia y las personas
users,
usuarias,
because
porque
together we
entre
will
todos y
achieve to make
todas
games
conseguiremos hacer que los juegos sean más
more
accesibles.
accessible. It would
También
also be
sería
important for there
importante
to be
que hubiera
legislation on
legislación
accessibility
en accesibilidad a los
to video
videojuegos,
games,
igual que
just
la
as
hay,
there
por
is, for
ejemplo,
example,
en
on
accesibilidad a
accessibility
las
to
plataformas o al cine, a la
platforms or
televisión.
cinema, television.
Hay hoy
Today there
día
is legislation in
legislación
the
en Estados Unidos que dice que la
United States that
comunicación tiene
says
que
that
ser
communication
accesible,
has to be
o en
accessible, or
Europa,
in Europe.
pero
But video
no
games are
se
not
menciona
specifically mentioned,
específicamente
and
a
it
los
would be important
videojuegos, y
if they
sería
were
importante que sí que se
mentioned and that there were
mencionaran,
even minimum
incluso que
fees to
hubiera
start.
pues cuotas mínimas para empezar,
Because,
porque
of course,
por
the
supuesto el
objective is that
objetivo es que
everything or as much
todo
as we
o
can be
cuanto
as
más podamos sea lo más
accessible
accesible
as possible.
posible.
And finally,
Y
I'm not
por
telling you
último, no
anything
os
new,
digo
I'm
nada
sure you
nuevo, que
already
seguro que ya lo sabéis,
know it, but
pero
why
¿por qué
isn't it
no? Es
nice to
bonito
remember that
recordarlo,
accessibility
que
adds
la
in
accesibilidad suma y nos
benefits us all,
beneficia a
because
todos
subtitles are
y a
useful
todas,
for all
porque unos subtítulos son útiles para
people who
personas
are
que
learning a
están
language, for
aprendiendo un
someone who
idioma,
can't have
para
the
alguien que no puede tener el volumen
volume
porque
because
está
you
en
are on
el
the train,
tren
or
o
because
porque
you are
está
at
en
home and it
casa
is
y
night,
es
or
de
someone
noche, o alguien que no oye
cannot
bien
hear well at
en
that
este
moment
momento
because
porque
there is
hay
a lot of
mucho
noise,
ruido,
etc.
etcétera.
So all
Así
these
que todas estas opciones de
accessibility options are
accesibilidad
useful and
son
beneficial for everyone,
útiles,
and
beneficiosas para todos y todas,
we
y
can
podemos
activate them or not.
activarlas o no.
Therefore, it
Por
is a
lo tanto,
very
es un plus muy importante.
important plus. Thank you very
Muchísimas
much for
gracias
your
por
attention.
vuestra
Here I leave
atención.
you my
Aquí os
email,
dejo mi correo, que es
which is carme.mangiron@uav.cat.
y de
Again, I would
nuevo
like to
quisiera
congratulate
felicitar
the
a la
organization of the fair and
organización
all
de la
the
feria y a todos los
volunteers
voluntarios
and all the
y todos
volunteers
los
and all the
voluntarios y
people who have
voluntarios, a todas las personas que han
attended by
asistido
this wonderful
por
fair,
esta
and well,
feria
I
tan
hope to see you
maravillosa. Y bueno, espero que nos veamos el año que
next
viene.
year. See you
Hasta
soon, and
pronto y
thank you
muchas
very
gracias por
much for
vuestra
your
atención.
attention.
Chao.
Bye.